Today on Locked On Blue Jackets, Sebastian High is back, and we're going to keep talking about the Blue Jackets prospect pool and how it is shaping up with these new additions. That's today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also have to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Like I said at the top of the show, we're going to finish off the conversation that we started yesterday with Sebastian. We're talking about the Blue Jackets prospect pool, how it looks now that we've had some graduates, some trades, some new additions. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the goalie prospect pool specifically. And we're also going to talk about a couple of guys who are going to be playing in new situations this season. Guys like Caden Lindstrom are going to the NCAA. Guys like Luca Morelli, who's going to be making the jump to the AHL. All of that good stuff. So I'm just going to jump right into my conversation with Sebastian. I want to talk about the prospect pool kind of in general now, because I don't remember if I mentioned this at the beginning of the episode or if I mentioned this off mic. It's in a weird place right now. A lot of the big names, you know, your Matejchuk, your Fantilli, etc., have graduated. Some names have moved on. Jiricek, Brindley, etc. Some guys are kind of moving up the rankings in the prospect pool. Like I would say, Luca Del Balbaluz is probably a top 3 prospect for this team right now, potentially, especially in terms of skating, I would say. Whereas, 2 years ago, he probably wouldn't have been in the top 5. How's the prospect pool looking? Obviously, with the addition of the 6 or 7 guys that we just talked about, how is the Blue Jackets pool?
I think it's good. I think, especially the addition of Jackson Smith changes the outlook of this pool a bit. I think he gives a true blue chip on defense when you already had one on forward with Caden Lindstrom. And I mean, the extremely exciting thing with Jackson Smith next season too, this is a guy who, I wanted to mention this earlier when we were talking about him. He's a player that was really flashing a lot of offense at times with the Tri-City Americans this past season, but it wasn't the most supportive environment for his offense. And then late in the season, he just put the team on his back and scored 9 goals in 11 games after scoring 2 goals the entire regular season prior to that. And this is a player who's going to be playing with Gavin McKenna next season at Penn State. That's a great environment for him. So I think that with Lindstrom heading to college with Michigan State and Smith going to Penn State, that you have your 2 top prospects on 2 of the top 4 candidates of winning the Frozen Four this season, maybe top 5 candidates. But you have your top prospects on some really competitive teams, and they're both going to be playing leading roles on each of those. So very excited to see what the season has in store for those guys. But yeah, I think as a whole, it's a prospect pool that has a decent amount of depth pieces. We've talked about this a lot on Locked On Blue Jackets as well over the past 2 or 3 years now. I'm a very big fan of Luca Pinelli. As you mentioned, Luca Del Balbaluz has really taken some big steps in his development, especially in the last season. And I think that you have a pretty nice smorgasbord of toolkits and profiles in this pool. You have a lot of diversity, and I like that in a team. Bring in not just we have our 3 or 4 favorite profiles. We're just going to only bring guys like this in, even if that was maybe half of an expectation going into this year's draft, with Don Waddell being it's just going to be Don Waddell picks in this year's class, and then there were a couple in there that were not so Don Waddell. And it's interesting. So I think that overall with the skaters, you have a good prospect pool, not anymore like a top 3 contending prospect pool like you had 3 years ago, perhaps, but that's largely because of graduates as well. So but I think losing Gavin Brindley hurts. That's a player that I regard very, very highly, and I don't think that was a trade that had good value for Columbus. I would say it had bad value for the Blue Jackets. In my perspective, I think that Gavin Brindley is a player that's going to be making a difference in the NHL this campaign. And that is not the type of player that I'd be moving on from if I were in the kind of like end of a retool phase, kind of, I guess, like the Blue Jackets are at the moment. But still, you have other skill guys in the prospect pool, like Jordan Dumais, who can, I guess, fill that type of at least offense, or if not the role. So I think overall it's a perfectly solid prospect pool with, again, two really, really great players at the top, and Luca Del Belbaluz being a really solid third guy behind them. And I've always liked Luca Morelli as well, especially this last season, been a really big riser for me in terms of like hindsight rankings of the 2024 draft. Like, I was far too low on Luca Morelli with that 2020 hindsight. So I think that you definitely have a collection of really fun guys in this pool.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder if, and I didn't like the Brindley trade either. I've talked about it multiple times on this show. Is it an emotional response? Maybe, but I don't care. I do wonder if some of it was the jumps that Luca Del Belbaluz specifically took this season. I think that the organization is really high on Luca Pinelli as well, and I feel like those guys kind of fill a similar niche as Gavin Brindley did. I still think that they gave up on him too early. I still think that there's a middle six NHLer there at the minimum. But I do wonder if it's a case of they were like, well, he's been overtaken by some other guys that were taken lower in the draft than he was. So we're just going to take the opportunity to improve now and we'll deal with it later. I do think they're going to regret that trade. Might be this season, might be next season. I don't know. But let's talk a little bit about Caden Lindstrom, who is a guy that every single person, I feel like, told me that he was never going to play hockey ever again. Misses most of the season due to injury, and then comes back to the, I believe it was the WHL final that he made his season debut in, and looked pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Seems like he's basically 100% healthy now, like you said. Going to Michigan State, going to be playing with Porter Martone, which is going to be a fun duo. How much more confident are you about Lindstrom becoming that impact player now than you were maybe 6 months ago when he hadn't played in almost a year and the sky was falling, right?
I don't think that my personal, I guess, perspective has had like the biggest of variances. I think I'm a bit insulated by not being a Columbus Blue Jackets fan. I think that as soon as that like anxiety and stress and emotionality comes into play, that it's a bit easier to kind of like go into the doom and then feel like the sky is falling inwards a bit. But with Lindstrom, I've always viewed this person, not just player, as like a tremendous competitor who also is able to make very mature decisions for his own well-being. So my sense was that for much of his recovery that, yeah, there were some setbacks and stuff, but I also got the sense that this was a player who wasn't rushing his way back, that other players may have been playing multiple months earlier than Lindstrom was, but he was prioritizing his own health to try to get back as close to 100% before kind of coming back. And I respect that. And I think that going over to the college ranks next season, where he doesn't have to contend with that, like if you include playoffs, like 80 game schedule that you've got in the CHL, if you're a really competitive team, I think that playing like 35 games a season is going to be really helpful for Lindstrom in the next year or two. And Michigan State is a tremendous program, not just in terms of recruiting talent and putting great hockey on the ice, but also in terms of conditioning their players. And I think that he's just a great fit in that lineup, and he's going to have all the opportunities to be the first line center on a team that'll be contending for Frozen Four championship. So I think he's in a great spot for next season, and I have more concerns now with injuries than I did when he was drafted. I'll give you that for sure. Like when he was like drafted, at that point, like the rumors going around were like, oh, like he's basically already back to 100% now at the draft, and then that ended up being protracted for like almost a year, right? But I think still at this point, I maybe it's hopefulness as well, because like you never want to see a 19-year-old kid already have his career being derailed by injuries. But the player that I saw on the ice there for Medicine Hat in the playoffs, like he still is the player that he is. He's so powerful. He's nasty. He has a wicked shot. He's able to handle the puck in a phone booth, and this combination of violence and leadership and dual threat scoring and tenacity and physicality, like there's so much to like with this player. So I think for Blue Jackets fans, just kind of keep your fingers crossed that he's able to stay healthy this year, and if he does, just lean back and enjoy the show, because it's going to be a fun year with him at Michigan State University. And I'll be watching a lot of him, as I'll be covering both the NCAA and the USHL next season, this coming season, for elite prospects. So Michigan State will certainly be a common viewing for me.
Yeah, it's going to be that Frozen Fury is going to be it's going to be fun between hopefully Jackson Smith and Caden Lindstrom. And I believe actually we'll talk about goalies in a second, but there's going to be a Blue Jackets goalie on MSU as well. Melvin Strahl has left the USHL. He's going to MSU as well. So there's going to be some CBJ representation at the hopefully in that game for the national championship, which should be fun. I've got more on the Blue Jackets prospect pool with Sebastian in just a second, but first I've got to tell you all about Monarch Money. Do you ever wish that managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, and they give you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. I love using Monarch Money because I don't have to go anywhere else. I don't have to open my banking app and then my budget app and then, make a spreadsheet and then, look and try and figure out what kind of notes I scribbled on this notepad while I had half a thought earlier. Like I can just do it all in Monarch Money. And it's great. It's so much easier. It's helping me get serious about budgeting, which is great because my budget is bad. So Monarch Money is making it a lot better. Do what I did. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for 50% off your first year. I know that we talked about him a little bit. I want to talk about him a little bit more. Luca Morelli, it sounds like, is going to be a Cleveland Monster in this upcoming year, which I probably might have left him in the OHL for another year. But if they feel like he hasn't got anything left to prove, and on an offensive side of the scale, I don't think he does. How do we feel about Morelli being an AHL player this season? I'm reminded a little bit of Luca Cagnoni, who obviously did the same thing, played his D+2 season, I believe it is, for the San Jose Barracuda in the AHL. Are we expecting a similar-ish kind of jump from Morelli? How do we feel about him turning pro after, at such a young age, coming from the OHL?
I think that Cagnoni is a very high bar. Like he came in and basically just started dominating the American League as soon as he arrived, and the scoring rate there has been ridiculous with the Barracuda. But I think with Morelli, something that bodes well is that he's a very high activity defenseman. This guy gets involved. He jumps into every play. He tries to lock down his gaps, be really like suffocating to play against. He sprints back against the rush. He tries to do all these different things to kind of just take space and time away from his opponents defensively. But it's definitely the defensive side of the game that's going to need the most work. That's always the case when defensemen make that jump, or especially in this mold, who are scoring over a point a game in the CHL, making the leap to the American League. But I think that the American League is going to be a really great kind of arena to challenge him in the ways that that could really further his development and maybe raise his ceiling a little bit too. Like he's been really able to show off the offense and the dynamic skill and the playmaking ability with the Oshawa Generals here this past season. But in terms of challenging him, in terms of being like playing against players that push him back, that force him into uncomfortable decisions and like play hard and are really like up and in his face, where he has to play a much more physical and hard-nosed style. Like, he's 6'2", 185 pounds. He's decently built as a right shot defenseman, but he's not got that like mean punishing kind of streak in him either. So I think that'll be a good environment to kind of instill those qualities in him, perhaps. But I'm curious to kind of see what kind of deployment he gets as well in the American League. Like, is he going to be like a sheltered third pairing guy at even strength who gets some power play minutes, or is he going to be like a second pair guy that gets relied on in all three zones already at the start of the season? I think that training camp is going to be very interesting to kind of keep an eye on him in NHL camp, because that's where we kind of also get to see like who do the coaches really respect, who they want to see more of, and that's where you might see his stock really rise internally as well. So that's going to be an interesting storyline to follow. But I don't think that the expectations should be too overblown with this player either. Like, he's a third round draft pick. Just had a fantastic D+1 season, right? Like 19 goals, 74 points in 67 games is great stuff. But at the same time, he's still a 19-year-old kid. He'll be turning 20 in early October. He was very old for his draft class. But give him 2 or 3 years, and I think that you've got yourself a potential number 4 defenseman, like either like a very good bottom pair guy or a solid second pair guy that can fill a gap. Yeah, on down that right side, I think it's one of the more interesting names here in the Columbus pool.
Let's finish off by talking about the goalies. Now, we've talked about this a little bit. Obviously, goalies don't make any dang sense, right? No one, the people who understand goalies are lying. Obviously, that's a little hyperbolic on my part. But the Blue Jackets, I feel like, are generally considered to have a pretty decent goalie prospect pool. Whether that's just because they have so many of them right now, I think they've done a really good job building up that prospect pool from it being like 0 goalies. Because like, and I've talked about this on the show at length, like the reason that Jet Greaves is a Blue Jacket is because they didn't have any goalies that were eligible for the prospects tournament in Traverse City. So they had to just sign a guy, and it turned out that guy was Jet Greaves. And that's turned out pretty well. So, they've gone from that to, I think they've taken a goalie in every draft for the past 4 or 5 years. Some of them look better than others, but how do you think the goalie prospect pool is looking? Like, is Andrianov immediately the best goalie in this pool? I know that the organization is very high on Sergei Ivanov. I know that Evan Gardner is very highly regarded. How does Andrianov fit into the rankings that the Blue Jackets have in terms of their goalies, do we think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's a nice fit in that I view Sergei Ivanov as like the incumbent top goaltending prospect, but the fact that they're separated by 3 years and the fact that they're very different kinds of netminders, like with Andrianov, it's pure physical tools. Like, this guy is big, he takes up space, he's explosive, he skates so well. And then you have the 6 foot tall, 157 pound Sergei Ivanov, who just puts up insane numbers year after year, playing in awful environments. So, like, just as a refresher for you Blue Jackets fans, Ivanov, who's been in the SKA St. Petersburg system for most of his career, but has been out on loan the last 2 seasons. So he's been playing in the KHL, but on awful teams, like just thrown to the wolves of like, please, just like keep up the wall. You're the one player saving us. And in 23-24, he put up a .928 save percentage in 33 games with Admiral Vladivostok. And then this past season, he played on renowned, not very good team, HK Sochi, and put up a .911 save percentage in the KHL, which on the surface is already nothing to scoff at, but while putting up an 11-21-3 record. Like, to hold numbers like this against in this kind of adversity and that kind of a losing record, very impressive stuff for me with Ivanov. I've always really liked his intelligence, anticipation. This is a very heady netminder who's able to defy the odds of his size because he thinks the game way better than any other goalie prospect in Columbus's pool. But I think that having both him and Andrianov in your system, you cover your bases a little bit. You have a real nice diversity there in talent. I like Evan Gardner as well. I don't view him as highly as either of the other 2 Russians here, but I think with him and, as you mentioned, Jet Greaves as well, who may be playing some pretty significant minutes this season in the NHL, I think that you have quite a few young netminders that can push for NHL minutes. Am I confident any of these guys are going to be a franchise starter? No. But I think that with both Ivanov and Andrianov, you have two players that could be 1As in the NHL if their development goes to plan. And especially with Sergei Ivanov, like, I'd give him like maybe another 2-3 years, and he just have to build up that frame a little bit at least. But I think that he's a guy that, in terms of that Jussi Saros build, he's kind of up that alley, and we've seen it work in recent years as well with guys like Dustin Wolf.
Yeah, for sure. Ivanov's a really interesting option to me because he's in the final year of his contract right now, which I believe means he can't be loaned out in the KHL.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to be playing for SKA St. Petersburg, which I think will be really, really telling in terms of his numbers. I know that KHL numbers are not the most reliable of numbers. I feel like they do tend to bulk the goalie stats specifically, but I think it's going to be really interesting seeing him go from, well, how does he perform on a team like Sochi, which is famously terrible, to a team like St. Petersburg, which is a much, much better team. I think it's fair to say. So that's going to be a really interesting thing. And also with Andrianov, is he going to get to play KHL minutes this season? Right? He's got some competition. I don't think he got a single KHL game last season. I think he was almost entirely in Russian juniors.
Yeah.
Does he get KHL time? Does he get? I always get this mixed up. Is the VHL is their second tier league? Like what's going to happen with Andrianov? So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, definitely curious to see what happens with the netminders, but it's always going to be a waiting game and one of patience with goalies. But I think that it's easily like a top 10 or top like 7 goaltending prospect pool in the league. Like there's some real quality in here.
Yeah, which is honestly, again, the first time in a long time, I feel like the Blue Jackets don't need to worry about their goaltending prospects, and they don't need to worry about their center depth.
Yeah.
Which for me were two of the big problems with the Blue Jackets the last like 2 to 5 seasons, right? So it's all coming together, we hope. If people want to learn more about prospects in general, if they want to keep up, obviously you said you're going to be covering the NCAA and the USHL this season over at Elite Prospects. Where can people find you online? Where can they find your work? How do they keep track of what you're doing when the season kicks off, Sebastian?
Yeah, so my written work is published over at eliteprospects.com. I do as well like the sister podcast here of Locked On Blue Jackets at Locked On NHL Prospects, where I break down everything about the league's prospects all year long. I took a little bit of a break now after the draft, which has been nice because it's kind of the end of my work year in a way. So I'll be getting right back into it here in the coming weeks, which will be very fun as well to break down more teams and their draft hauls. But on Twitter as well at @high_Sebastian. You can find my work there. I always platform the stuff I post as well.
Great. Well, thanks for coming to talk about prospects, Sebastian. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it too.
And that's all I've got for today. We will be back with you on Monday with a brand new Locked On Blue Jackets, and the offseason continues. So I think what we're going to do, actually, is I think we're going to do a mailbag. So if you have questions that you want me to answer, comment below, at me on Twitter, on Blue Sky. You can find me on Blue Sky at JKOBFORSTER, the show at LO-Blue Jackets. We're at LO_Blue Jackets over on Twitter. Like I said, comment below on YouTube if that's where you're watching this. And you can also email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. So send your questions in and I'll answer them on Monday's show. Thank you once again for listening to this show. And until then, make sure you stay locked on.